you all for being with us this hour. It is a big day. When the Supreme Court first handed down the decision in Roe, just shy of 50 years ago, it's not like it was not controversial when it happened. There were definitely people who were opposed to the Roe versus Wade decision in 1973, in particular the Catholic Church, which had always been staunchly anti-abortion. But it wasn't as controversial in 1973 as today's politics about it might make you think. For example, it was not a particularly controversial decision among American evangelicals. The Southern Baptist Convention, America's largest Protestant denomination, they adopted pro-abortion rights resolutions regularly during the 1970s, including after the Roe decision in 1973. The Southern Baptists. When Roe was handed down in 73, the former president of the Southern Baptist Convention welcomed it and explained why. He said, quote, "I've always felt that it was only after a child was born and had a life separate from its mother that it became an individual person. And it has always therefore seemed to me that what is best for the mother and for the future should be allowed." Southern Baptist Convention. Reactions to Roe versus Wade were also really heterogeneous for a long time between the two political parties. There were plenty of anti-abortion Democrats, and there were lots of pro-choice Republicans. Republican governors were at the forefront of decriminalizing abortion in the states in the 1960s, including the governor of California, a man named Ronald Reagan. In 1967, Ronald Reagan signed into law the most liberal abortion rights bill in the country in California. So it's not that there was not disagreement over abortion or that there weren't strong feelings from various quarters about Roe versus Wade, but it was different. And it specifically wasn't really a politics issue. It wasn't an issue that swayed elections or that was a key part of the two parties' political platforms. And contrary to popular belief, Roe versus Wade in 1973 did not spark some kind of immediate big backlash among conservatives and evangelicals and Republicans. It evolved differently, and it's important to know that today. The anti-abortion movement as an explicitly political project, a movement married to the Republican Party, that had to be deliberately created. It did not organically emerge, and it actually did not happen until years after Roe was decided. I mean, the influential right-wing pro-segregation religious leader, Jerry Falwell, his first anti-abortion sermon was not until 1978, more than 5 years after Roe. Even as late as 1980, when Ronald Reagan, by then, was no longer governor of California, he was running for president. In August 1980, Reagan gave a speech to 10,000 cheering evangelicals in a Dallas arena, and he talked about creationism and the Bible. He talked about how evangelical institutions ought to be able to remain racially segregated if they wanted. That's nice. But even then, he did not mention abortion. The plan to use abortion as a right-wing political organizing tool, to try, for example, to move Catholics to the Republican Party, to give a focal point, a policy focus to right-wing Republican organizing against women's rights. It was a choice for them. It was a project that did not emerge organically. It was something they didn't really start working on in earnest until the 1980s. Ronald Reagan, for example, he personally had to do a U-turn. He had to repudiate the abortion rights bill that he had signed as a California governor when he became the first president to make opposition to abortion a central part of his political identity. His personal transformation on this issue shows the political transformation that was happening in the Republican Party on this issue, too. Pretty soon, opposition to abortion would become effectively an entry requirement for elected officials in the Republican Party. And then pretty soon after that, anywhere Republicans had political power, they would use it to attack abortion rights. The states became laboratories for these policies. It became almost mechanized over time that as soon as one Republican-controlled state would innovate and come up with some new way to restrict abortion rights, all the other Republican-controlled states would then follow. The most restrictive laws allowed to stand by the federal courts would then become the template for all the other Republican-controlled states to try to enact those most restrictive rules too. Wanting to ban abortion became not just a litmus test question for Republican would-be elected officials. Over time, they made sure it was the litmus test for judges to be nominated by Republican presidents. And at first, that was kind of tacit, like everybody knew it, but nobody would admit to it. You know, a wink and a nod between Republican White Houses and conservative activists. By 2016, though, Republican President Donald Trump just made it official. He was known, obviously, for saying the quiet part out loud. By 2016, he was flat out saying it. I will only nominate justices who will overturn Roe. And he did. And so today we have the results of not just these justices ascending to the court. We have the result of a concerted political project that is attached to the Republican Party that started 40 years ago for political reasons. And I know there's a lot to say about the court and the reasoning of today's ruling and the individual justices who did this, and indeed the individual states and what their new laws are and how fast the curtain is coming down, and we are going to do some of that over the course of this hour. But I think to know where we are and to know what's coming next here, we have to get real about who did this and how they did it. Because this is part of a political project. This is a 40 years in the making project for a big, well-staffed, well-funded, very radical project of the American political right and the Republican Party. And I say it's very radical on purpose. I mean that both in terms of its aims, we're seeing that today, but also in terms of its tactics. It is impolite to say this, I know, but the anti-abortion wing of the conservative movement and the Republican Party has long had an armed wing, a terrorist wing, that has killed a lot of Americans in the past few decades and set off a lot of bombs for terroristic purposes. And that is terrible and criminal, but it is undeniable that that is part of how the extreme right has approached their role in this issue and how to get what they want on this issue over these past 40 years. That has existed alongside the well-staffed, well-funded, well-organized advocacy groups and think tanks and campus groups. The anti-abortion political project of the Republican Party and the political right has been the central organizing principle for the right's entire effort around the judiciary, one for which there is still no match or mirror on the left. It's a big deal. It's a big, now multi-generational, again, well-funded, tightly organized, and extremely, extremely militant American political project. And I think what's important to see today is that for them, this is not a movement that just got what it wanted and now will go away. This is a movement that they have been building for 40 years that is just now hitting its stride, that is just coming into maturity. I mean, this is a movement that can claim 6 of the 9 members of the Supreme Court. We think of Chief Justice Roberts as the moderate justice among them, but you know what? When he was nominated, part of his bio was that he was the spouse of the leader of an anti-abortion organization. I mean, the anti-abortion political project of the American right is a way of life for people on the American right. It is an industry, it's an employer, it's a big movement that has succeeded now as of today at the first top of the list thing they wanted to do. Why do you think they would stop now? Now, when they're really feeling their oats and starting to show what they can do. I mean, Justice Amy Coney Barrett is 50 years old. She could be on the court another 40 years. Justice Gorsuch is 54 years old. Vice President Pence's immediate reaction when today's ruling came down was to crow about how we now need a nationwide abortion ban. Don't leave it to the states, ban it nationwide. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi today pointed right at that as what to expect next from them.
In the Congress, be aware of this, the Republicans are plotting a nationwide abortion ban. They cannot be allowed to have a majority in the Congress to do that, but that's their goal.
That's their goal. This is where we are. Of course, as long as a Democrat is president, any Democratic president would veto a nationwide abortion ban that was passed by a Republican-controlled Congress. But, you know, there's a presidential election around the corner. Any Republican president would sign a nationwide abortion ban without hesitation. That said, if we're being real about this, that question might be moot by the time we have the next Republican president. Because there is nothing in the reasoning of today's opinion from these 6 justices that would stop them from accepting something like a fetal personhood case. Fetal personhood, which is a concept that the right has been building in this political movement that they built around the abortion issue. A fetal personhood case getting to this court would give this court a path to not just let individual states ban abortion, which is what they did today. If they took a fetal personhood case, that could be their vehicle to impose a nationwide ban on abortion on the order of the United States Supreme Court. One that would apply, yes, even in California, even in New York, even everywhere. And yes, that would be a radical thing for the Supreme Court to do. But would it be that much more radical than what they've done today? I mean, they've kind of broken the seal here, haven't they? Roe was a 50-year-old precedent that had been reaffirmed by the Supreme Court itself multiple times. That did not matter to them at all today. Yesterday, they took a 111-year-old law on concealed weapons in New York. 111-year-old law. And threw that out too. I mean, what's the principle at work there? Right? States can't be trusted with the power to regulate concealed handguns, but they can force you to give birth to a child against your will. One 111-year-old precedent, one 50-year-old precedent. What's the consistent principle between these two different rulings? The only consistent principle between these two rulings in 2 days is that the conservatives have the power on this court, and they will now wield it however they want to achieve whatever outcomes they want, to change the country however they want without restriction, and you must do what they say. But again, I think it is helpful to not try to find some evolution in conservative jurisprudence here. This isn't that kind of ruling. This is a political project. This is the culminating work of a concerted political project that defined this as a goal for the American political right and that put in place the people who would enact it. This is a very well-organized, well-staffed, well-funded, very committed, very radical, in its prime movement that still sees it as a problem that the blue states are still going to have abortion rights. I mean, overturning Roe today immediately effectuates outright bans on abortion in many states, and we're going to talk about that over the course of this hour. But it also really does foreshadow a future case, perhaps quickly a future ruling, in which the Supreme Court will outright ban abortion themselves in every state. And it is worth getting real about that. Justice Thomas today in his concurrence spelled out the rights that he wants thrown out next beyond abortion, now that they've taken care of Roe. He wants Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell, in his words, reconsidered, which means he wants them overthrown. Those 3 cases are about contraception, consensual sex between adults, and same-sex marriage, which means next on Clarence Thomas's list are to get rid of all of those things. If you are in a same-sex marriage, this may be the time to start thinking about duplicative legal arrangements to protect you and your spouse, your family, your kids, your property, your finances. If this court moves quickly on Justice Thomas's list of what rights they're going to abolish next, being in a same-sex marriage now means there is a target on you from this court, and this court has proven themselves to be absolutely unconstrained, not only by precedent, not only by consistency with their previous reasoning, but by any concern for public opinion. Take that seriously. Tactically, that notice from Justice Thomas today, lining up all of those other rights he's ready to get rid of now next, I believe that will have a practical effect on this political movement from which he and his colleagues have emerged. He's put out that list now, what they're going to go after next. He put it in writing in his concurrence today. Watch for action in response to that. Watch for people involved in this political movement to start to get them to Justice Thomas, to get the job done. On marriage rights, watch for a county clerk somewhere to refuse a license to a couple trying to get married in order to start court proceedings that would put marriage back in front of this court. Watch for somebody who works at a health facility somewhere to refuse to process a prescription or an order for contraception, for an IUD, for the pill. And again, to start litigation, to start legal proceedings, which will eventually put access to contraception before this court. They have asked for it. The movement they come from will give them that. Watch for Texas or another Republican-controlled state to bring back its sodomy law, to control with whom you are allowed to have sex and how. They'll try to bring back that law. It will start legal proceedings that will eventually be designed to put sodomy laws back in front of this court. They have asked for it. The movement they come from will give them that opportunity. They are unconstrained in seeking to change the country in these ways. I mean, for them, the dam is burst. What do you see in their behavior that would give you any reason to believe that they see a reason to stop? In the short run, We do now have abortion bans in effect in multiple states as of right now because of today's ruling already. We're going to be talking about that in more detail over the course of the hour. One of the short-run consequences of that is not just that the number of states, but the actual number of buildings, the actual number of facilities in which an abortion legally can be provided in America has just shrunk radically. The number of legal abortion providers in America has today radically contracted. And that means the existing extant, still working abortion providers in this country now stand out more to the people who have been targeting them for decades. It means that the people from the terroristic side of the anti-abortion movement will now have a smaller number of higher profile targets to target. We should take that seriously. At a time when violence against abortion providers is already spiking, the providers who are now left in the states where it is not banned yet, those providers are facing a lot of changes. They're going to have to operate now with a higher volume of patients, people coming from further away, people therefore coming in later in their pregnancies, which means potentially more complicated procedures because of that. But they also are going to have to cope, on top of all that, they're going to have to cope with a higher threat environment than they are used to. Because the anti-abortion movement, feeling its oats, really does have an armed terrorist wing that shoots people. And that's been true for decades. It has never been more crucial to protect abortion providers. The Department of Homeland Security today released a notification to law enforcement officials around the country of potential domestic violence extremist activity following the court's ruling. Also in the short term, aka now, the underground plans for gray market and black market abortions, those also now go into effect. It's go time. Nobody ever plans to have an unplanned pregnancy, but that means other people who support women have to plan for women who will suddenly find themselves in desperate circumstances. Those networks have long been nascent. Those networks have long been in the works. Those networks have long been training. They now are coming online. So women can still get help, so they don't have to try to face their crisis alone, whether or not it's legal. But I'll close with this point. Not just for pregnant women, but for all Americans, today starts a new era of very, 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 very big government. Very intrusive government. Do you want to start a family or have your first child? Or maybe you have a child or children already, you'd like to have one more? Mazel tov, congratulations, it is a beautiful thing. Everybody with a heart wishes you all the best. In this country, though, now, the decision tree for you is much more complex than it was before. Now, obviously, most wanted pregnancies are safe and straightforward, and they end with the happiest possible news. But sadly, many don't. Because of what the court did today, if, God forbid, you have a miscarriage in your pregnancy, now in some states, that will be more than a personal tragedy. That will be a matter of public record and potentially public investigation. Your miscarriage will be viewed as a potential crime. Are you suspected of having induced that miscarriage? Did the police want to talk to you about some questions they have about whether somebody else might have induced it for you? I mean, how do you plan to prove that it happened on its own in the natural course? How can you prove it? These officers are going to need to speak with you. I mean, think about how that gets enforced. Think about the relationship between American women and the government in this environment. How do authorities know if you've miscarried in the first place? What if somebody heard you were pregnant? Or they thought you might be pregnant, and now it seems like you're not? How is that investigation conducted? How is the state government in your state, how are your police locally going to check to see if maybe you had been pregnant and now you're not, and did you just commit a felony? If you seek care at a hospital in the event of a miscarriage, the drug you're most often given as treatment for a miscarriage is the same drug that Republican lawmakers are now trying to treat as an illegal instrument of abortion in their states. I mean, even if you have just had a miscarriage naturally in the natural course of events, you will likely be treated for that miscarriage with medication they are targeting with their abortion bans. Your use of that drug may make you a criminal suspect and make the exact scene and circumstance of your marriage, your miscarriage, a crime scene, even if it was in the hospital. In some states, even if the complication in your pregnancy is a risk to your health, if continuing to carry the pregnancy could injure you, doctors in some states will be forced to stand by and deliberately inflict that risk on you by forcing you to keep the pregnancy going against your will, because otherwise they will face jail. What does that do in the relationship between you and your doctor? What does that do, again, to the relationship between you as an American woman and your government? If you have the kind of complication in your pregnancy where the pregnancy is not viable, where the baby cannot live, in some states, you may now be forced by the state government under threat of criminal prosecution to nevertheless carry the non-viable pregnancy to term. Think about how that gets enforced. Think about what that means about the relationship between you as an American citizen and your government that is forcing that out of you. Today starts an era of very, very, very big government, where it's the government that decides if you're going to have a baby or not, where it's the government that is in charge of your pregnancy. For women who have an unwanted, unplanned pregnancy, the nightmare is here. In many ways, though, it is also here now for any woman who wants a child, who wants to have a baby, and now. I mean, until today, this was an area of life in which we had some privacy to make our own decisions. Now, at least for now, in Republican-controlled states, it's the police. It's the state. Knock, knock. Joining us now is Amy Hagstrom Miller. She is founder and CEO of Whole Women's Health, an independent abortion provider with locations in 5 states, including the great state of Texas. Ms. Hagstrom Miller, thank you for being here today. I know this has been an ordeal already today.
Thank you for having me, Rachel, and I still appreciate your expertise on this issue today.
I don't know if I have expertise as much as today I have feelings, and I'm trying not to let them show. I want to show our viewers what's on the website for your organization right now. I think we have the screenshot of the website, yeah. It says, the Supreme Court just turned its back on abortion rights. We never will. They've just turned their back on millions of people across the country who need abortion care. We will never do that. We are here. We are not going away ever. And then you list your clinics that are still open and still offering what services they can. Amy, can you just talk a little bit about what it was like at your clinics today? What it was like today for your staff and for the patients who are being seen at your clinics today?
You know, Rachel, today's been a very difficult day. Even the most planning and the most anticipation can't prepare us for a day when this kind of announcement happens. We really lived in 2 different Americas today, even more than we have in the past, where we had to stop all abortion care in the state of Texas, while at the same time focus on opening our doors and expanding our welcoming of people in Virginia and Maryland and Minnesota. That split is super difficult to navigate. We have been helping people leave Texas now for almost 10 months since SB 8 was passed in Texas. We started a program called the Wayfinder program that literally helps people find their way when they're denied abortion in one state to a place where they can receive that abortion care. And we have helped people with flights. We've helped people learn how to fly for the first time, who've never left their home state, who didn't have ID, who didn't even know how to check into a hotel. And this was just with Texas's abortion ban. What we're facing right now in this country is devastating, and it denies so many people access to safe abortion care that we have come to count on for 50 years. And it has allowed us to plan our families. It has allowed women to dream a future for themselves with equality and autonomy that's equal to men. Whether you ever had an abortion or not, you were allowed to know that you would be able to have one if you needed one. And it's allowed us to build a future for ourselves that's fundamentally equal, and that has been taken from us today. Now we have people forced to carry pregnancies against their will. And my staff in Texas had to say that to people to their faces today. My staff in Texas had to bear the burden of this ban, saying to people that they were denied the care that they needed when we are fully trained and capable and ready to provide it. We changed the course of people's lives today with this ban, both in good ways, in haven states where we can be proud that our clinics can stay open, and in awful ways in places like Texas where we had to deny people the care that they deserve from us.
When you talked about the work that your organization has already done in terms of helping women in Texas, where a de facto ban has been in place for almost 10 months now, helping women in Texas get to other states already, that experience that your organization has been through is really important for the Texas women that you've served. It may also serve as a template and as a sort of lessons learned opportunity for lots of people, lots of places around the country that are now going to be trying to open up essentially Underground Railroad type paths for women to, as you say, find their way. Are there lessons learned? Are there things that you thought about the way those efforts would go that didn't turn out that way? Are there things that, is there advice that you would give to people who are going to be doing that kind of work now all around the country, given that you've been doing it in Texas for 10 months?
Yes, absolutely. And we have independent abortion providers like Whole Women's Health collaborating with abortion funds all over the country and collaborating with clinics in places where abortion has been banned and trying to partner with our clinics in places where abortion is safe and legal and still protected. And the Wayfinder program we developed at Whole Women's Health Alliance is a program that we had to develop because of this terrible ban in Texas. And we have learned so much from what goes on with our patients when they're trying to navigate not only the unplanned pregnancy and being denied the abortion, but like I said, flying for the first time. Most of our patients are parenting already. Almost 70% of them are parenting already. They're navigating work and childcare during a pandemic. We've had people drive from McAllen, Texas, all the way to Alexandria, Virginia. That's a 3-day drive with their children in the car because they didn't have childcare. Come all the way to us in Alexandria, Virginia, have an abortion, and get in their car and drive all the way home, like overnight, so that they could get to work on time and not lose their job. This is the reality. We have people who don't have an ID to fly. We have folks who can't afford the hotel. So even if our abortion fund covers the hotel, or the Frontera Fund covers it, or the TEA Fund, or Fund Texas Choice covers their hotel in Alexandria, or in Charlottesville, or in Baltimore, they can't even check into a hotel because the hotel requires a credit card to check in. These are folks who don't have a credit card. They've never used Uber. They've never used Lyft. They deserve our compassion. They deserve those of us who are determined to build a network of support and compassion to help people navigate this abortion ban and navigate the travel, if they're able to travel, in order for them to get the abortion that they need.
Amy Hagstrom-Miller, the founder and CEO of Whole Women's Health. Amy, I appreciate you being here tonight. I know it's been a long day and you don't have to be here talking with us about this. Thank you, and good luck to you and your staff.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I appreciate it.
All right, we have a lot to get to. We've been showing live images of protests that are underway tonight in a number of places around the country, including outside the United States Supreme Court as we speak. Coming up next, the very real thing that activists are doing that Amy was just describing there to try to help women get abortions in states that are outlawing it, talking about some of that practical nuts and bolts work. Much more ahead. Stay with us.